start now. And it's going to click continue. Good to go.
Good evening and welcome to May's Power BI Manchester User Group. My name is Alex Taylor. Tonight we've got two fantastic talks from Marnix Jansen and Ben Howard. We're in for a treat of two talks. One's on evaluation context in DAX, and the second one is on Power BI presentation is 90%. So quick little intro about myself. You may have seen these slides previously. Power BI User Group has been going for 3.5 years. We've got over 2,500 members. We've got 6,000 followers on LinkedIn. And when we do face-to-face user group meetings, we get 80 to 100 people attending in Manchester. We're hopeful that when restrictions release, we'll be able to relax. We'll be able to have the sessions back in Manchester before the year is out. But whilst this continues, we'll be doing the user group sessions and the Power BI Lunch and Learn sessions, which many of you attended on a weekly and monthly basis. The user group is a great way to network, and we do share all the documentation slides throughout the sessions. If you're new to Power BI User Group, obviously the sessions have been going for 3.5 years. Here's a few testimonials. Obviously the feedback's very positive. And we've got a good rating of 4.6 out of 5. So if you enjoy the session tonight, please do give us a review when Meetup prompts you. About myself, I am a BI data analytics recruiter by trade. I've been doing recruitment for 16 years, but I've been passionate around doing data for the last 10 years. I've been doing events throughout the last 8 years, running data meetups, seminars, lunch and learn sessions, you name it. So if you are looking for a new role at the moment in the BI data analytics space, don't hesitate to get in touch with me. My details are below on that slide, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn or drop me a call. And if you're a hiring manager and you're looking to grow your team, please do get in touch as well. I said I'll be happy to help you with some market information, rate cards, you name it. I'll be happy to give you some advice and best practice, and also remote onboarding. So tonight's agenda, Marnix will be kicking us off in a couple of minutes' time, and then Ben will be at 7, and then around about 10 to 8 we'll be closing up with questions, just so everyone can get outside their front doors in the UK for the NHS clap. We've got a Q&A box which is on the right hand side, so please do add your questions. Ben will endeavour to answer questions whilst Marnix is chatting, and Marnix will do the same whilst Ben is chatting, but if those questions are more focused towards Ben or Marnix, we will push them to the speakers. Little intro about Marnix. Marnix is a BI specialist from Holland. He specialises in data information systems. He is a certified expert in analysing visualization data, Excel and Power BI, finance and accounting, process analysis improvement, and also works well with R, DAX, VBA, and M. Ben is a certified trainer, MVP. He's been doing 25 years with consultancy experience in project, Power BI, and online. He runs our lunch and learn sessions, so you're probably sick of seeing his face, but he will continue to be doing these sessions throughout the next 6 weeks, because we are now signed up for a second season. And then just to reiterate the sessions that Ben's been doing, we are doing season 2 from the 10th of June, so a week on Wednesday. So if you have missed any of the sessions from season 1, I did send them through via the meetup earlier, but if you want the links to them, I'll be happy to send them through. That's 6 one-hour sessions, which finished on Wednesday this week with a quiz. We've got the data sets and the slides. So without further ado, I will hand you over to Marnix.
Okay, it's just going to show his desktop, I hope.
Yeah, we are ready for you, Marnix.
Yeah. Do you see my screen now?
No, you need to share it.
I'm hitting the share button, so that should work, right? And then, oh, there we go. Here we go. Now you should.
There we go. I can see it. Now we got you. I just need to.
Got me? Good, excellent.
Get rid of Alex's little photo from there and put you in.
Sounds good.
Hang on, let's do that. Send you live. I think we can now see, we can see your presenter view, Marnix, actually, on PowerPoint. So you're probably sharing the wrong screen.
Ah, right. Okay. So there we go.
That's your Outlook.
Yeah. I got to see my Outlook. There we go. Going back to the sharing the screen. sharing, start sharing. Share.
It's just you.
I'm getting the right one. Screen one. Does that look better?
That looks beautiful. We've all got, yep. You're good to go, mate.
Evaluation context in DAX. So thank you guys for inviting me to come over here. I should have been in Manchester right now, which is unfortunate, but what's unfortunate that I'm not, of course. I'm still in the Netherlands. I wished I was over there right now. What are you going to do? Well, Alex already did a great job introducing me, so I do not have much to add to that other than that, you know, I'm a Microsoft certified trainer, and I speak at conferences, and I host lectures at universities and train people on all on Power BI. So I'm really all about Power BI. And today I'm gonna present evaluation context. So this is really the cornerstone of everything that you're gonna do in DAX. So it's really crucial to really understand that concept of evaluation context. Now, for those of you who are not that familiar with DAX, Microsoft took their formula language in Excel, so not VBA, but the actual formula language, that is where DAX was born, and they took it out of Excel and simply put it in Power BI, but then they developed it on to make it usable for a BI tool. Now, the big difference between formula language in Excel and DAX and any other programming language, as far as I'm aware, is that if I have a formula in Excel, so if I write the formula and I hit my enter button, okay, so that formula is going to be sent to the engine is going to evaluate that formula and then return a result. Well, something similar is going to happen in DAX. However, the result of a formula does not only depend upon the formula itself, it also depends upon the evaluation context it is being evaluated in. Okay, so that is really important. I can have a formula, one formula, have it evaluated in a certain context, and it's going to return a certain result. I take that exact same formula, I have it evaluated in a different evaluation context, and that same formula is going to return a different result. There are two main categories of evaluation context. There's filter context and there's row context. I'm going to go by them one by one, starting at filter context. Now, what I have here in that blue bar, I have written a measure. So that is simply just a calculation stating that this is the sum of the sales table and then the quantity column. So I just want to add the amount of units that have been sold. That's just what I want to know. So all I've written is this measure, and I've applied that measure in a pivot table below. And as you can see, there's a different result every single time. So, you know, that's what you'd expect, of course, because you'd expect that every client's going to be purchasing a different amount. However, I did not specify anything in that blue bar. I did not program anything to make that happen. So there's something going on below the hood. There's something happening. DAX is doing something to make sure that I receive a different result for every client. So the best way to go about that is to just show you an example. So I'm going to go by this first one. So for Amazon, the total quantity is 50. Now, how has that been determined? How did DAX go about calculating that? So first, anytime a evaluation is done within filter context, there's always the filters are going to be applied. Okay, so this is a measure. A measure is always going to be evaluated within filter context. So the first thing that DAX is going to do when it is evaluating within filter context is apply the filters. So the first thing is that filter context, so the context within the evaluation is going to be done, is going to be filled by whatever is coming out of my row headers. Okay, so for that first example for Amazon, the first thing that's going to happen is that that filter context is going to be populated. Amazon is going to be entered into the filter context. So that's the first thing that DAX is going to do. Okay, so next is going to apply the filters. So then we need to know where this is coming from, so that we know, so that DAX knows where to apply that filter. So I have on the left-hand side, I have that same table, and then on the right-hand side, this is the way a canvas works. You can always see on the right-hand side which tables and columns have been used for your visuals. So this is a matrix visual, and on the right-hand side, I can see that it's Amazon is coming out of my clients table and the client name column. Okay, so there's a filter going to be applied on that specific column within that table. So that physical table is going to be filtered down on client Amazon. So let's have a look at that specific table. There's a table in my model. It's called my clients table, and of course it's a tiny little bit of dummy data, but there's 5 clients here. And so for that first client Amazon, the filter is going to be applied on Amazon. Okay, so the rest is going to get filtered out. And all I'm going to have left in this table is that one record. Okay, so the filter is going to be applied on the entire record. So that goes for the same, that goes for the client ID as well. After the filter has been applied on Amazon, there's also a filter being applied on the client ID. Now let's have a look at the model. So I have a dimension table holding my clients, and then I have a fact table in which I recorded all of my sales transactions. Now there's a filter applied on my clients table on client ID 10. A relationship does nothing more than just allowing for that filter to flow. Okay, so in official database terminology, it's propagation of filter context. But what it comes down to is that simply in this example, this 10 is going to flow from the clients table to the sales table. That's all that's going to happen. So afterwards, that filter is also going to be applied on my sales transactions table. So on this here column, there's going to be a filter on client ID 10. So all of the other records are going to get filtered out. Okay, so this is the first thing that DAX is going to do when evaluating within filter context. And after doing so, the calculation is going to be done. So after the filters have been applied, it's going to take the sum of the quantity column out of this table. That's going to add up to 15. So that is how a calculation within filter context works. Multiple filters going on at the same time. If I also want to filter down on one specific product, one specific kind of training, okay, so then that, or consulting, any kind of service or product, then of course that product is, that filter is also going to be applied on the products table, and through the relationship, that filter is also going to flow to the sales transactions table. So that 15 is going to come down even more. Okay, because there's an additional filter applied. So how are you going to use this? How are you going to use this to your advantage? So there's many ways, of course, that you can use this, but I have just a simple example. And again, I have a measure, and I want to know how many clients are buying something with my firm. Okay, so that is the business requirement. Now, how I went about doing that? So I started off writing a values formula, values being a table formula. So the result out of values is an entire table. In this instance, it's going to be just one column. It's going to be the sales table client ID column. And what values is going to do, it's going to take all of the duplicates out. Okay, so I'm going to have one column left, recording all of the client IDs after taking out all of the duplicates. So that's going to be an entire column. So you wouldn't be able to enter an entire column into a measure. You're going to have to aggregate somehow to turn it into one single value. Okay, so what I get here is I simply counted the rows. So count rows, the formula does what you might expect. It requires a table as an argument, and then it's going to count the rows of that table. So that works. So if I just use this formula as is, I'm going to have just a amount of clients that bought something with my firm. Okay, but now I'm going to apply this formula here in a pivot table because I want to know the trend, right? So quite often you do in BI, so you want to know the trend. So then I've added that, I've applied this measure in the pivot table below. Now this pretty much a similar thing is going to happen. So there's also a table, a dimension date table. Okay, so what's going to happen if that date dimension is going to have a one record for every day. So if it's get filtered down on a month, I'm only going to have the dates left in that month, and that is going to flow to my sales transactions table. So I'm only going to have those sales transactions that happened in November left, and then the active clients are going to be counted. Okay, so that is how that works. Then we have a formula calculate, which is the queen of the DAX formulas. Now calculate is going to allow for changing filter context. So I have an example here. So calculate, what it does. First parameter, the first argument is a expression. So right now that expression is a formula. And then the second argument of the total quantity a measure here is a filter. So there, I'm going to be applying a filter. I'm going to change the filter context, applying a filter on one of the client names. So now what will happen if I apply that formula here within the pivot table? Well, I'm going to have two competing filters, okay? Because as I mentioned before, I'm going to have a filter here on the client Amazon, and at the same time, there's also a filter being applied in that in the measure. So there's two competing filters. And then as you can see here, the calculate always wins. And that is due to the fact that a calculate statement is going to override what is coming out of the row headers. So whatever is coming out of the row headers is going to be overwritten by the calculate statement. So calculate is going to take that initial filter context, put it in the garbage, and then re-enter whatever has been stated in the calculate statement, in the filters of the calculate statement. Okay, so that is how the calculate works. A measure, well, I mentioned that before, a measure is always going to be evaluated within filter context. Now I have a little bit of a small quiz here. Usually I'd ask people to raise their hands and shout out the answers. That's a little harder to do this remotely. So just take a minute and think, you know, what is the answer? Is the answer A, B, or C below? Just give yourself a minute and then think what you think it is going to be. I'm going to help you a little bit because I'm going to give you the table after the filters have been applied. Now, of course, I'm going to give you the solution here. Doesn't make any sense, right? There is no formula. It just says sales table quantity column, but it doesn't specify what to do with that column. Somehow, in a measure, you need to state how to aggregate. Take the sum, or take the average, or take the max, or any kind of aggregation in order to do any analysis on this column. So this right here would result into an error. Okay. So that is filter context. Then moving on, row context is very different from filter context. A row context is an iterator. Row context allows for iterating over a table. So if a formula is being evaluated within row context, DAX is going to go to the first row of a table and perform an operation. Then DAX is going to move on to the second row of that table, perform that same operation. By the entire table. Now that could very well be used in a calculated column. So if I'm going to add a column to a table, that formula is going to be evaluated within row context. So here, if the formula states sales quantity times sales unit price, so take the quantity column out of the sales table multiplied by the unit column out of the sales table, it's going to do that for every row. So it's going to take all of the values in that row, and you're going to be able to perform a calculation with the values in a row. So you're going to actually use all of the values in the row, and then you're going to do some kind of calculation with those rows. Okay, so this is going to be evaluated within row context. Row context can also be generated. So you can write a measure and then have row context generated. For instance, if I would want to calculate my total sales, so what I will do is I use a SumX formula, and SumX is going to require two parameters. The first one is going to be a table over which DAX is going to generate row context. And then the second parameter is going to be an operation to perform. Okay, so in this case, it's going to be a calculation. So if you're going to run by your sales transactions, and for every sales transaction, calculate the revenue for that transaction, And you're going to add all of the outcomes. Okay, you're going to sum all of the outcomes for every individual sales transaction. Yeah, so the result, of course, is going to be your total sales. Second example of row context getting generated. This again is a table formula filter. So what filter is going to do? It's going to have a first argument being a table over which row context gets generated, and then a second argument being an operation to perform. So this is a logical test. Okay, so you have to specify some kind of logical test, and an index is going to run by a table, row by row by row, and for every row evaluate that logical test. So if it evaluates to true, that row is kept. If it doesn't, that row is discarded off. So you're going to end up, if this is your example, you're going to end up with the sales table after a filter has been applied on client ID 50. That's going to be the result. So you're going to end up with the entire table. Okay, so this again, it's a table function, so the result is going to be an entire table. A column, like I mentioned before, is always going to be evaluated within row context. And I have a little quiz again. So I have a formula here. So this is my clients table. Okay, this is my clients table. And I specified a formula here in a calculated column. So this is going to be evaluated within row context. And so what do you think is going to be the result in this cell? And I know the others as well, of course. So give yourself a minute. And then I'm going to give you the solution. This is row context. Row context does not filter. Filter context filters. So if this is going to be your formula in a calculated column, okay, so you're just going to have the sum of that sales table and on the quantity for every row. There's no filtering occurring. Okay, now I could have that happen. I could have that happen. That requires context transition. So then I need a calculate statement, because calculate does just that. It's going to turn that row context into filter context. So all I here is wrap a calculate around the formula. And now it does do what I showed you before. It does first apply all of the filters and then perform the calculation. Okay, so that would require context transition. Finally, if I'm gonna call a measure, so if I've already written a measure and I'm gonna call that measure, there's going to be an implicit calculate statement around that measure. So as you can see, the result here, this measure, if I've just written that exact same formula I did before in the calculated column, but due to the fact that this is a measure and I'm calling a measure, context transition gets triggered, and now I have this formula evaluated within filter context. Okay, so that is the introduction. And now I'm going to give you a demo and show you how this works in Power BI. I have here a Power BI model, and it's a tiny little model. Okay, so I just have a little bit of dummy data. It's the most simple model you can imagine. So I have a sales table, and then I have clients dimension, products dimension, and time. Okay, so that's all that I have. And now I'm first going to set up an overview of the sales transactions. It's just a few, but let me just give me a matrix visual. Show you the clients, the client names, and then I'm going to add the months and make this readable. So I'm going to make this a bit bigger. I wish Microsoft would fix this and make this not a text size 8 by default. But I'm going to do it myself manually here. So I'm going to go to the grid. There we go. That's better. So now we want to know the revenue. Okay, so we want to know the revenue. But if I go look into my sales table, okay, so I do have a quantity sold for every sales transaction. I do know the unit price, so the price for every individual unit that got sold, but I do not have the revenue. Okay, so I have to calculate that revenue. I could either do that by first adding a calculated column, but I want to avoid having to do that. So what I'm going to do, I've already created a measure table. I always like to do that, so I have all my measures together in one container, holding all of my measures. So I'm going to add a new measure here. So what I want to do is I just want to run by that, what is revenue? I just want to run by that sales table, and then go by that sales table row by row by row, and for every row, multiply the unit price times the quantity, and then sum them all up. So that is exactly what sum is going to do. So we want to go by that sales table. We want to multiply the quantity times the unit price. We need to apply that measure here in the table, that matrix that I just created. So that works. Okay, so it is going to be evaluated within filter context, right? So first, on that sales transactions table, I'm going to only have the records for the Nike left, and then I'm going to also only have the records for August left here for this evaluation. So this works, right? Moving on. So what I want to know next is how much did we make more or less than a month before? It's quite often people are more interested in that than the actual number itself. So we need to do something to calculate that. So I'm going to create another matrix. Add my months. Make the size similar. And now I'm going to come up with a new calculation in which I'm going to be able to see how much we sold more or less than a month before, also called month on month. I'm going to call this month on month. I'm just going to take that revenue that I just calculated. This time I'm going to deduct the revenue in the previous month. So I'm going to use a calculate statement. So I'm going to take this revenue, but now I'm going to change the filter context, saying don't filter this on the month coming out of the row header, but the month before that. So that will be the previous month. Okay, so there's a formula that allows me to do that. Then it actually requires a date column to base that evaluation upon. Okay, so now this is all I need. So now I have the current month minus the month before. And that works. Okay, so now indeed going from that 116 to 481, that makes about sense. That makes sense. Okay. Still though, this is a little off here because now we have 116 for August. We simply do not have July in our model. Okay, we don't have any July data in our model, so we don't know for August. You know, it's just not we just not brought that data into the model, so we simply do not know how much the month on month was. So for the first month in this table, we do not want to see anything at all because we simply don't know. So how we're going to go about doing that? Well, then we have to say if. Right? We want to figure out whether this is the first month in our data set. So the selected value we'll make that the month number. Selected value is the month number. So this is a selected value within the filter context. Okay, so here it's going to be 8, here it's going to be 9, here it's going to be 10. That's going to be the result every single time of this selected value formula. And now we need to extract the month. Equals the month. First date. And now I need to specify all. I'm going to explain it in a little bit. All the dates. In my date. Because if I would not specify all, okay, all is going to make sure that whatever is coming out of the row headers gets ignored. Now, if I wouldn't make sure that that happens, if the filter context would get respected within the evaluation, then here in September, okay, the outcome, if we're just going to respect whatever is coming out of this row header, then the result here is going to be September. Because September is being brought into the filter context. The same goes for October, right? But here, so the result of this will be 8, and the result of this will be 8, and the same goes for here. Then it will be 9 and 9, and 10 and 10. So we don't want to have the first date within the filter context. I want to have the first date of all the records in that table. Okay, so that is what all is going to allow for. So if that happens. In the first date, don't return anything at all. Give me just a blank value. Otherwise, do return this. Just give me the outcome of this formula that we specified here. Okay. And now we got rid of August. So that worked. Still though, this doesn't make much sense, does it? This total here. And that is due to the fact that we are using the months that are being put into the filter context. Well, what we have here is a total calculation at the total level, so there are no months being entered into my filter context. So this doesn't make any sense. Plus, we don't want to do a specific calculation here. We just want to have the sum. We just want to have the sum of these three values here. Okay, so what I'm going to do, if that is what I want to have, I need an iterator. So I want to iterate over this table, over these 3 months. Okay, and I want to go by this row by row, and then perform this calculation that I already have specified here, and then add the outcomes. So again, that is SumX, right? That is SumX. So if I want to buy just these 3 months, I need to create a table that contains nothing but just these 3 months. So I've already mentioned how the values formula does just that. It takes a column and then returns. It takes a column out of a physical table and just returns the unique values in a column. So if I'm going to use this, okay, so now I'm going to be able to iterate over these 3 rows, evaluation. So all of this. Okay, this is the second argument right now. This is the second argument of this SumX formula here, all of this. Issue that I have right now, however, is that I mentioned before SumX, you're going to be, so you need a formula in the first parameter being a table, and then a formula being in the second, the second argument having a formula which is going to be evaluated in row context. And as I mentioned before, row context, so you're going to be able to use the values in a row and do some kind of calculation. So here, this is my value. A little bit of just a text string saying September. What kind of calculations am I going to do with that? Of course, I do not want to do any calculations with the word September. I want my model to get filtered down on September. So I do not need row context. I need filter context. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap all of this in a calculate statement. All of this is going to be wrapped in a calculate statement. Now it's going to be evaluated within filter context, and now it does work. See, because now if I take the total, started off by 116, and then I went to 192, so this makes sense, right? We went up by 76. So on the month level it works, but also on the total level it works. And that formula got a bit messy, right? So what I'm going to do, and I was always advise everyone to do this, go to the DAX formatter, just paste your code in here, format it, and then bring it back. Okay, so it's really nicely lined out, easier to read and understand. Okay, for people that didn't know, if you're writing your M code, it's a bit off topic. It's a bit off topic, but what we have right now recently is we have a similar thing for your M code. Okay, so you just copy and paste your M code in here, it's going to do the same thing. In Power Apps, there's a formatter available in the tool itself. Wouldn't it be nice if we have that in Power BI? Anyhow, so now we do have a month-on-month that works. This still is kind of elevator analysis. This is still kind of elevator analysis. Let me turn this into a visual, and then make sure that visual gets laid out a little bit there. Yes, I do want data labels. And then, well, we've been provided with something new this month. Let's use it. I like it, the shadows. Yeah. All right, so now we have, but as I mentioned before, this is still kind of elevator analysis, right? So this is still just showing me what happened. We went down by 343. So yes, my client doesn't need to do the math. It just says it here, but that doesn't add much value yet. Okay, so you really want to go into diagnostic analytics. You want to allow for, you know, answering the question, but why did it happen? How come? Why did the revenue come down by 343? So then we need to make sure that we perform some analytics that answer that question. Now, the way we want to go about that is we want to know. So we have a decrease by 343. How much of that decrease is due to new clients purchasing items with us? How many is on account of us losing clients, and how many is due to remaining clients that spend more or less? Okay, so in order to do so, I'm going to create that little table showing my months again. I'm going to start off by that first one saying, okay, how many clients bought something with new clients? I'd have to say though that the scope is simply month on month. So I do not care if a client, if a client didn't buy something the month before, okay, and it did way back when, before that month, then I still consider it to be a new client. So the scope is just month on month. I do not go back any further than that in my analysis. So now I need a new measure, okay? So in the new measure, we're gonna deduce new clients. So I need a new measure, the algorithm. So the way that we are gonna go about doing that. So,
hey Marnix, can I just ask a quick question?
sure.
Do you know how to use Zoom It? Because we're struggling to see your DAX that you're typing in there.
Oh, is it too small?
Yeah, we may not be able to fix it, but yeah, I thought you could do that. Yeah, I think that's really cool. Thank you.
Yeah, good interruption. Thank you for.
A lot of people won't know that little tip there. So do you want to tell them the shortcut key just for increasing that size of the DAX?
I'll just control and then mouse, just scroll up with your mouse. Okay, so is this better?
Yeah,
okay,
looks great.
Okay, excellent. So then let me just briefly show you the measure that I've written before. It's a bit too small, I guess. So now we have this here. So this indeed is the formula I've written before. So people that missed it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to iterate over my months, right? And for every month in a filter context, I'm going to have an evaluation be done. Okay, so then this is how I determine my month on month. But now we want to go one step further and also allow for analyzing why. So here's my new clients formula. I did not do anything yet. So the algorithm, the way I'm going to deduce that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a list of clients that were buying something with me in the previous month, a list of clients buying something with me in the current month, and then deduce the new clients, right? So if I know, I'm just going to look at the clients that occur on the list right now that did not on the list before. So I first need to create those two lists. So I'm going to have a variable. We can enter that in a variable. So variable is the current month. I have a list of my clients. Well, here it is again. So I'm going to take the values of the sales table and the client ID. So that's all I do. So I just enter this table in a variable, and that variable is called current month. I'm going to press the second one, previous month. So now what I need to do is I need to change that filter context again. So we add a table in calculate table. Calculate table is a similar operation as calculate. It's going to allow for changing the filter context. So the table that we want to change the filter context out of is that same table. Client ID table. This time however, we want to change the filter context. Give me that. So I entered both of those into a variable. So I got both those lists. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to deduce which clients occur on my current table and did not on the table of the month before. Now I cannot, again, this is a measure, so I cannot have an entire table as a result. I need to somehow aggregate the result, which is exactly what I'm going to do. So count the rows. Okay, returns the rows of the left side table, which do not appear in the right side table. That's exactly what have the count. Okay, so I'm going to have new clients. If I add that here, so we really get to see clients that bought something with me this month that did not the month before. Now I can also have my client drill down. So I add my client name to the drill down hierarchy. This is the matrix. Okay, so right now I would allow for my client to drill down on a month and see that yes, indeed. Let me turn the drilling of other visuals off. So yes, indeed, if I drill down on any particular month in September, okay, then yes, shell, yeah, that is exactly indeed in September the new client. So this is a way to quickly see which clients have been buying something with you that did not before. Now again, we have that same issue that in August, Right? We don't want to have anything there in August, okay, because this is the first month and we did not enter any date of the month before into this specific model. So I'm just going to steal my own code that I've written just now. This part. Protection, right? To protect this code. And indeed, do return all of this. And now we should, yes, so August, we lost August, which is what we wanted. Again, let me format this a little better. Here we go. Power index. There we go. Alrighty. So again, what we have as well is that the total doesn't make much sense. Okay, so yes, this works now, but the total doesn't make any sense, and we have that same issue. So what we need is just the sum of these three values. That's all that we want to have at the total level. So the way we're going to achieve that is a very similar way than we did before. Here, I'm going to iterate. Right, so the first argument, again, is going to be the values of the months. Okay, so I'm going to actually create that table to be a first argument of my SumX. And then all of this is going to have to evaluate it within a filter context. And then we're lost. So now this works. Now it just adds the three values on top. So that's my new clients. Okay. Now we get the count. We were not interested in the count. I'm not going to toss all of this because I do think it's interesting to know how many new clients that we managed to acquire. But still, see, this is why I want to have this button, so I don't have to go back and forth from Power BI to the DAX formatter all the time. Okay. So I'm going to create a new measure. I'm just going to copy the measure I've written before. But now we do not want to have a count row. We don't want to count the rows of this table. So this table, the result of this table is the amount of clients that bought something with us. Not the amount, just the list, the column with all the new clients. But we don't want to count the rows this time. This time we want to take the sum of the revenue. Okay, so we're going to run by that table, the table that gets created by the accept formula. New client, we want to calculate how much they we want to calculate their revenue. Well, I showed you before how that is done, how you calculate the revenue, right? So if you want to calculate the revenue, you run by that sales table, and then you multiply the quantity by the unit price. Go. New clients, let's call this measure here new clients revenue. Okay. Now this is not gonna have the expected result. So if I add that measure, right now what it's saying here is that there is one new client in September and that we generated 481 in revenue on that one new client. Well, that is not correct. It's unexpected, right? We expected 120 because there's one new client, but that one new client spent 120, did not spend 481. What's going on? This has got to do, of course, with evaluation context. And so what you need to think about is the evaluation context that is available here. So think about it, is this row context or filter context? Okay. Well, what we have is we have a SumX formula. SumX expects a first argument, a table, and a second argument is a formula that's going to be evaluated within row context. So yes, this entire formula is going to be evaluated within row context. Row context does not filter. Okay, so if I calculate for, so indeed the outcome of that table, that accept, is one client, and then it's going to calculate the revenue, but it's not going to filter. So the result is going to indeed be the total. So this is not what we want. We do not want to have this right here being evaluated in row context. We need filter context. Okay, so we have to trigger context transition. We have to make sure that this piece of the formula is being evaluated within filter context. So I'm going to wrap a calculate statement around it. And now if I have a look, it works. Now I was teasing you guys a little bit, I have to be honest, because what I should have done and what is far easier, instead of rewriting the formula and wrapping a calculate, right, I can also simply call that formula, call that measure, right? I mentioned before, if you call a measure, there's going to be an implicit calculate written around it. And so there you go. It works. It works just by calling the measure. I ensure that the evaluation context gets flipped from row into filter context, and it works perfectly fine. Okay, so now we have our new clients. Let's move on. So now we want to have the new clients. New clients at bottom. I'm going to steal this here formula as the basis for the new, for the the lost clients. Clients that we lost in any particular month. So the lost clients. All we need to do is just turn these two around. Simple as that. So I just turn these two around. I did. I'm going to apply that formula now here. And have a blank result. Now, why would that be? How come I have a blank result? I just turned the two around. That doesn't make sense, a blank result. Well, it kind of does. How much revenue do you make on a client that you lost? You're not going to make much revenue on a client that is gone, are you? So no, you do not. You want to know how much they spent the month before when they still were with you. So you need to not take the revenue in the current month, but in the month before. Okay. So we're going to go ahead, so previous month, take our date field. That will work. Okay, so we lost that revenue. So you know, if we lost revenue, then we actually want to see that we lost that revenue. So it's going to be the sum of these two, of course, here in October. So that is what we lost. But if we lost revenue, let's make sure that it's a negative number. Okay. And then finally, so how much did we make more or less on clients that remained with us, so that were with us the month before, but and still are. So again, I'm going to steal this formula, create a new measure. I'm going to call this remaining clients. Okay, so now what we need to do is we don't want to have this accept here. We want to use a natural inner join. Let's see what it says. Natural inner join. Joins the left table, right table using the inner join semantics. Yeah, that doesn't help much if you don't know what an inner join is. An inner join is just going to result in the overlapping records. Okay, so any record that is not overlapping is going to be filtered out. So that's what we want to do here. However, we want to see the month on month, so we want to see how much did they spend more or less than in the previous month. So we're going to use our month on month that we've already created, and that is going to be our calculation. So now if I apply that here, okay, this is how that works out. So now if I take the 3, then the month on month, the new clients. We'll skip that month to month. I meant the lost clients, new clients, and remaining ones. New clients, their revenue. I'm going to add this into a chart, a kind of chart. Okay. So here, right now, what you can see, and I always like to set my models up this way, my dashboards up this way. If I add that shadow here as well. So here now what we have, an increase in September. So now here you can see why. A decrease in October, and here you can see why. So you can really look into, you know, what is the cause? Why did it go up? Why did it go down? And then especially if you have like a sales organization, which you find quite often, you got account managers on, you know, steady clients, and there's also account managers or sales reps responsible for acquiring new business. Well, in a sales organization like that, you definitely want to be able to split, you know, your revenue delta by those two. But it's always interesting. Now I did this here by a client. Of course, you can also do the same thing by a product or, you know, any other kind of dimension you might want to do this by. Well, one thing that I still want to do before I end, because what I can also do here, if I take that same overview of my month, and now I want to know like the actual new clients. Not month to month, but just in total over all times. So I'm going to take this new client, this formula here, and well, let's quickly have a go by here. So it's easier for me to understand what I'm working with. Format. So I'll take that formula, add a new measure. So now I have to do something with this here. So this is the table specifying the month before. So right now we don't want to have the month before. We want to just have a table with all days before the one in the current month. So we have to do something. So in this that calculate table, the values ID, I'm not going to touch. That's fine. But I don't want to have just the records in the previous month. I want to have all dates before the current one. So I'm going to have to create a filter. A filter table, so an entire table as a filter statement in my calculate table statement. I'm going to take all, just so not just the ones in the filter context, right? All of the dates. And then I'm going to say, well, give me only those only records where the date is before first date in the current filter context. This should do the trick. Oh, new clients over all time. So it's very similar, right? And it works for all sorts of other scenarios as well. So new clients all time. And there you go. So indeed, this works. It's only September and October. And we can also drill down. That same thing is going to work. So if I add a client name in my drill down hierarchy, I can also actually see the clients that we've newly acquired. And that's about it. So now drill down and see the new client that has been acquired. And that's about it. So that is pretty much the fundamentals of evaluation context. And I think that I also spent about an hour talking. So that should work. How do we proceed? Do we have any questions, people, that I might be able to answer?
Yeah, hi Marnix, thanks for that. That's brilliant. We've got a quick question just in the chat there from David. It says, is there a specific reason why variables are used instead of nesting the formula within the overall calculation?
Yes, that's a very good question. Well, you know, in DAX, I have to say, because variables are used in all programming languages, as far as I'm aware of, just for creating building blocks. And that makes your life a bit easier instead of having one very long formula. Instead of having one really long formula, you create a couple of building blocks and then you produce the final calculation with those building blocks. Okay, so that is the reason why I did that here. In DAX, there are other reasons for using variables, and that also has to do with evaluation context, but that's a bit too advanced for right now. Okay. So that's about it, I guess.
Yeah, I think that is, Marnix. I'm kind of sharing my screen now, so we will get rid of you in the nicest way, but do keep an eye on the keep an eye on the chat, on the new chat, and
Sure.
let's see what we get on there.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get my video over in.
Thanks, Marnix. That was a really good presentation. Really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Picked up some tips myself.
I guess one other question, Marnix, just before you go. Are you able, can't quite remember where you got the data from for that file. Are you able to share the PBIX file and the data out of a CSV file as well?
So it's just a tiny little bit of dummy data, which I'm very willing to share. No problem, of course.
Top man. Thank you. Okay. Right. Well, you have, everybody, the pleasure of, somewhat pleasure, of listening to me. As Alex said, you're probably bored of listening to me so far, especially if you've caught the lunch and learn. And I also think this is about the fourth time I've presented here at the Power BI user group. My name's Ben Howard. I'm a Microsoft MVP, have been for the last 11 or so years, but bizarrely in Microsoft Project. And that piqued my interest into reporting because, of course, we always report, especially around projects. I've got a blog as usual. I guess the important thing is if you want to reach out during or after this session, grab me on LinkedIn and let's connect up and become virtual friends in this strange world that we live in. Okay, in terms of a presentation, of course, all presentations should come with some credits, and this one is no different. And I've called this presentation kind of presentation versus the rest of the job, or presentation is 90% of the job, and there's a reason for that. Now, I'm no longer a young person. I did a degree in computer science before computer science was really a thing, and I remember one of my old lecturers, I mean, most of them were academics, right? But one actually worked out in the field and came into college part-time to teach us, naive 18, 19, 20-year-olds about IT and computer science and what it's like out in the real world. And he said to me, and it stuck with me, he said, Ben, presentation is 90% of a job. Just make sure the other 10% is 100% right. And, that's something I've applied throughout my working life, and it really comes home to roost, if you like, when you're dealing with data, because I go out and do a lot of training and Power BI consultancy with people, and they, as soon as they start to bring their data into a single system, they start to say, oh yeah, most of our data is rubbish. Right, and so that's what this is about. It's not about the data, it's about presenting the data. It's not about getting the data right, because that's what Power Query is there for, or other ETL systems. This is about presenting the data. So credit to that gentleman. All of my customers, of course, it sounds a bit trite, but we're only as good as our customers make us, and our customers keep giving us challenges, which is brilliant. And I spend the majority of my time now doing various bits of Power BI consultancy. I nicked a lot of the slides that I'm going to show you from the Power BI Platform Summit, and they're presented by Tommy and Charles. And so thank you to those guys for at least providing the framework for what we're going to talk about. Of course, I nicked some stuff from everywhere, right? Various free to use images from the web. Okay. Because of course, why wouldn't you? It's all out there. Also, though, my interest is piqued and was piqued in reporting many years ago. And I've read various books. There's some great ones out there. Data Story by Nancy Duarte is a great book. Visualize This by Nathan Yao. And of course, this one, Storytelling with Data by Cole Nussbaumer Knaflic. Now, you might look at that and you might say, why have you written all of that in lowercase, Ben? And the reason I've written it in lowercase is because that's a picture of his book on the right hand side there. It's written in lowercase. And this is what I mean, is you've got to be aware of what you're doing. Presentation's 90% of the job. It's very trendy these days to have organizational names in lowercase. I remember sitting on a plane several years ago when we could sit on planes, looking at Virgin Atlantic's plane as I was sitting in Manchester waiting to take off. They were the first organization I was really aware of that changed their logo so that it was all lowercase. Okay, but you go and have a look at Norwegian Airlines or many other organizations and just have a look. A lot of the data, a lot of things are written in lowercase now. So, you know, although you might not think it makes a difference, actually, this sort of stuff does make a difference. Okay, it is important. The nuances are important, and that's kind of where we get to. You know, here's some nuances on this one. This visual, which I created in Power BI earlier today to kind of represent, you know, what we're talking about, presentation versus the rest of the job. That's the same data. In fact, it's the same, exactly the same visual, just switched around. One's a bar chart and one's a column chart. Okay, the column chart's this one on the left here, the bar chart's this one on the right. You know, which one is the better visualization? Well, partly that's kind of down to you to be thinking, which one do I prefer most? Okay, they've both got some, they're both fairly clean. The one on the right perhaps flows a little better. It's a bit more squat. We're going from the left to the right, which is how we read things. And if I'm thinking, you know, presentation is 90% of the job, well, I've got the initial 10% here, a nice bar, and then 90% over on this side. So, you know, there isn't a best visual. There's just one that perhaps suits the format of the report that you're dealing with better than another visual. Okay, and as you can see from my slides are widescreen. That's how Power BI works. It works on a 16:9 format generally, which is what widescreen is these days. And so therefore, it's important that you're presenting something which flows in that type of context. Okay, so that's a little bit about an introduction. Let's think about what we might cover off. And I wanted to talk about not a huge amount about Lance Armstrong, but Power BI is not about the data. Okay, in the same way Lance Armstrong wrote one of his books when we all believed he was a superhero, before we all realized he was full of EPO, and his book was called "It's Not About the Bike." Okay, plainly, if it's not about a bike, what's it about? Well, it's either about cancer or Lance, right? This one was about cancer, but ultimately, subjectively, everything's about Lance Armstrong when you read about the book and you read more about Lance. So, it's not about the bike, it was about Lance. For us, it's not about the data, it's about the way you present the data. If I'm going out and doing some consultancy and I'm looking on that month-on-month data that Marnix just presented to me, with the best will in the world, I don't care if your data sales are up 5% or 20% or 50%. What I care about is how are they visualized? Are we able to turn that data into information? Can we create a story or a narrative around it? Is it easily accessible? So there's lots of other things to think about, but the data, don't get me wrong, the data, the job that Marnix does with the measures and the formulas and the context filtering, the filter context, calculate, all of that is absolutely critical. That's 10% in my mind. It's got to be absolutely right, but what we do with that data is the important thing. Okay, so sometimes we need to think then, who's our end customer? Okay, and we'll come on to that. How do we read data? Now, actually, I didn't put a slide on this, but we read data in the Western world like we read books, okay, or pages. We start at the top left and we scan to the right and then we go down. Okay, that's how we read data. So that's how we should present our reports. It's fairly simple. Okay, the layout's massively important as well. What's our report layout look like? And what colors do we use? Okay, and also, of course, are we using the right visuals? Okay, and again, I go back to that previous point. What is the right visual? Some are blatantly incorrect, and other visuals, are more useful. Waterfall charts, for example, to see the difference in things. Dot plots, dot charts, etc. At school and at college, we probably, looked a little bit around line graphs. Those of us who did statistics will have done bell charts and bell curves. We might have done histograms, bell charts, bell curves. We might have done bar charts, etc. But did we get much more sophisticated than that? No, we might have done a pie chart, okay, but we didn't necessarily get that much sophisticated, that much more sophisticated. So again, we need to sit down and say, well, I got this data. How do I visualize that? What is the best way to visualize that data to help people understand it? So there's a lot going on in the background. Okay, so I've said it's not just about the data, but I wouldn't even bother trying to create any sort of report if the data quality wasn't right. Okay, you're on a hiding for nothing, because what you're going to do is you're going to present a report to the CEO or your sponsor, and they're going to look at it and they're going to go, well, it's got some pretty colors in there, Ben, but I don't believe that figure. Okay, and sometimes you only get one chance at something. So there is your credibility shot. Yeah, and it may not be your data that you're presenting, it might be somebody else's, but you know, it's got to be right. Being a Power BI wizard to, you know, isn't enough. The data's got to be right, and then the visualizations have to be right. It's about communicating that data visually. Okay, that's what Power BI is. It's a visualization tool. Yeah, it's not a textual tool. It's not an audio tool. There's no music that really goes with it. Okay. There's not necessarily a lot of words that go with Power BI reports. Although, of course, you can write that in, you can create them. Okay. Power BI is about taking a set of numbers typically and communicating the data visually. And I say typically because it isn't always. There's a lot of work that people have done around books and you know, stories and visualizing kind of stories, bizarrely. And you know, we do have 6 or 8 different types of stories. The hero and villain, you know, etc., and some work's been done in Power BI to look at that, or at least in artificial intelligence, and then visualize those stories in Power BI, which is great. But you know, Power BI is about communicating the data visually, and this is what you need to do. You need to begin to think like a designer, not like a database guy, you know, which is where a lot of us come from. So what do I mean by that? What does thinking like a designer do? Well, thinking like a designer does this. We've got somebody who designs a product. Heinz tomato ketchup, fabulous product. I've got some in my fridge. And when I was a lad, right, you always used to knock on the top of a bottle and you'd spludge it out and it would splurge all over your beans or your sausages or whatever. But that's, you know, that's the tool we had at the time. We had glass bottles and it always used to get sticky and nasty around the top. And then somebody, of course, in product design said, well, the product's good, but the way we deliver the product, the experience of that product isn't very good. Why don't we literally turn it on its head and create a squeezable product? And that's what you've now got. You know, we don't see Heinz tomato ketchup in glass products in glass bottles anymore, I don't believe. We see them in these squeezy bottles. Same product, all right, slightly different. European laws have told us to get rid of a bit of sugar, but essentially the same product we all love, but a different experience. Okay, so we start to change the way we think. We need to begin to think like a designer, not it's all about the data. Yeah, because it's not all about the data. It's all about how you're going to consume the data. Okay. So think like a designer. I also think about this, right? Communication is insert the word you want in there. Communication is difficult, right? This is difficult. Teams is difficult. Okay, we've had some questions on Teams already. I can't log into Teams. I have to log in this way. How do I, you know, I can't yet put my hand up in this Teams live meeting, but you can post some questions. So communication is very one way. It's difficult for me to engage your audience. I can't walk around. I can't see you. I can't see the guy at the back who's just nipped off to the toilet. I can't see the, you know, who's sitting at the front, who's sitting where. It's difficult. And you also need to begin to engage your audiences when you produce reports. Yeah, different people learn in different ways. We all kind of know this. Some are visual. Okay, so they like graphs and they like charts. Okay, They're great for Power BI. They're great consumers of Power BI stuff because Power BI is a visualization tool. Some are oral. They like to hear things. Okay, so they love listening to me talk, God help you, but they don't like looking at the PowerPoints. Some are verbal. Okay, they like to read things. Okay, that's kind of a verbal communication, is reading words. And again, Power BI isn't a very wordy tool. And some are kinetic, like to touch, and they like to feel. Okay, and they like to try. You know, one of the reasons Teams so difficult is, you know what I miss? I miss Alex's beer and pizza at the end of this. Okay, I miss the hello, how you doing, John? How you doing, Pete? How you doing, Jim? How you doing, Alex? What are you up to? What do you think of that? Did that bit go right? Yeah. So communication is just difficult. We need to know that. Okay, that's why in some respects we need to think about how people are going to consume our product. Our product ultimately is a set of numbers that we want people to consume and take away, provide some, do something with them, make some management decisions with them, etc. So that's why we need to begin to think like a designer, because our end result is some sort of communication tool. You know, and here I am. You can't see me, but my hands are going all over the place because that's part of communication. Okay, so you know, communication is just difficult. And we want to move away. Well, not only do we don't necessarily want to move away from communication, but we want to move it on. Now, if we can, we really want to begin to tell some stories. Okay, now storytelling's, yeah, maybe it's something you've not done since you had kids. Okay, so you know, maybe you've got kids that are 9 years old or younger, and every night you sit down and you read them, you know, the Gruffalo or Harry Potter or whatever. Now the story you tell will depend upon your audience. Okay, the Harry Potter story read to a 9-year-old might be different to the Harry Potter story, you know, I'll tell in the pub when we're all allowed to go back and go to the pub. Yeah, so storytelling depends upon the context of where you are and primarily who you're telling the story to. Lots of stories have good people and bad people in them, you know, good versus evil. Now, again, I'm not talking about getting good versus evil into your reports, but you do need to, if you can, have some narrative that puts it all together. And there's various features that we got in Power BI which at least allow us to begin to tell a story if we wanted to. So, you know, you can publish your Power BI report up to the web. You can use great things such as bookmarks and focus, and now of course we can use shadows as well, perhaps to highlight different bits. So again, think about how we might begin to use Power BI to tell a story. Now, here's this next slide is the first one that I stole, so thank you to Charles, primarily. The science behind data visualization. There is some science behind data visualization. Okay, but it's still a bit of an art and a bit of a science. But this is what I want to concentrate on. Most bad or even worse forgettable reports all have the same problems. Okay, God help me if I've ever produced a forgettable report, and I probably have. Okay, but that's my time gone into doing something that I've produced, that somebody's looked at, and it's been so bland or so overwhelming that it's been incomprehensible. In truth, I'd rather have a bad report than a forgettable one, which sounds awful. Yeah, these days I try and move away from bad reports to having memorable reports. But you know, there's a report on the web, the URL's on the screen there. Okay, that looks like an Excel report, and there's lots of things wrong with it for lots of reasons. I want to pull out a couple that I think are, you know, that I hate. You know, the things that I just try and get rid of all the time. Things like excessive precision. We can see it on the screen here, student gender analysis, 47.59 versus 52.41. Well, who cares about the 0.41? Why not just 48 and 52? Yeah, that's good enough. I especially hate excessive precision on things like, you know, sentiment analysis. So, are you feeling happy today? 1.3% of my customers felt good because I'd sent them some marketing stuff. Well, first of all, what does good mean? Okay, that's subjective. And 41.3, well, 41.3 is, it's going to be 40, isn't it? 40%, 2/5 of my customers. Yeah, and therefore 3/5 felt sad or whatever. But, don't put something down to, 10 decimal places. It's just pointless. Okay, just keep the data at the right precision. If you need 10 decimal places, if you're doing some Six Sigma quality stuff and we're doing some stats, you might need 10 decimal places. If you don't put kind of excessive precision down. Think about what people actually need. The other bit that I hate is clutter. Okay, if there's too much stuff, can you get rid of the stuff? Does having the stuff add any value? Okay, and we'll have a look at some dashboards later, specifically, and we'll see what happens when we get rid of the clutter. Does the dashboard look better or not? Yeah, so never take the defaults. Okay, if I go back to, and we'll go back right the way through to here. Okay, I actually removed a lot of the clutter from both of these images. Okay, the clutter that I could get rid of, I'm not sure that there would be much that I could perhaps get rid of from this chart here. Let's just have a look at this. Okay, I could probably get rid of the legend because it might be obvious from the bars that I've got here, the constant lines, what we're talking about. Okay, but Power BI didn't in truth give me enough fidelity that I felt that was a possibility. Okay, so in this case I was limited by the tool Power BI. The best tool for any job, any visualization freehand tool. So Adobe Illustrator, PowerPoint's pretty good. Yeah, but I'm not going to bring a million rows of data in PowerPoint and visualize that. So you are always, of course, limited by the data that you've been given. Let's just get back to here. Okay, so the clutter I hate, and never ever just accept the defaults on any visualization. Have a look, say what you should always ask yourself, what is that value, what is that legend adding? Is it adding anything, or is it just kind of clutter? Okay, the next bit to ask is, or think about, is who's my end customer? And do you ever stop to think or ask? Now, here's a visualization. I don't know where it came from. Looks like it's Excel. I think I might have picked it up off LinkedIn. I kind of have this habit of just snagging or taking a copy of every visualization I think is interesting, whether it's a good visualization or a bad visualization. So this is chart 2.5. As it says at the top here, it says artificial intelligence revenue by industry, world markets 2025. So it's a suggestion, and it's obviously bloody awful. Okay, for lots of reasons. Okay, but what we should be thinking about when we're going to produce a chart is, is it the right visualization? But more importantly, who is my end customer? And do you today stop and think and ask yourself that? Okay, because if you're not, then that's the thing that perhaps you should do. So if I take, I did some work for some finance organizations plainly, and quite often we'll put Power BI in to kind of replace Excel in some respects. Yeah, because it's easy to share. We can just publish everything to a report, and we can provide permissions on workspaces, and it's up to date and it refreshes every hour, etc., etc. And so that's what we do. So if I look at somebody like a credit officer, somebody who's responsible for saying, you can have some more credit or not in an organization because a customer might want to buy some more stuff, they're interested in potentially the numbers. Okay, so for those guys, I'd look at tables or even Excel. Yeah, so I like Power BI, but I like the right tool for the right job at the right time, even more so. Okay, I think one of the worst things you can actually do is create a report which looks like your Excel report. And even worse is when your customer right clicks and they say, I'm going to export that data to CSV file. And you say, why are you doing that? They say, well, because I want to do some further analysis. Right, you have just failed. Okay, let me hang that out there again. You've just failed. I want to right click, copy to CSV. Right, you've just failed in your job of producing a decent report, because that report is not fit for purpose, because somebody needs to do some further analysis. Right, you know, either the requirements weren't right at the front at the beginning, or or Power BI is the wrong tool, and what they should be really doing is whatever in Excel. But just be very careful of that. So credit officer, often just interested in some numbers. Credit controller, they're kind of going to want to know, who are my top 10 debtors? What's the age debt mix look like? What's not 30 look like, 30 to 60 days, 60 to 90 days, etc. All of that sort of stuff in a graph. So they're kind of going to want mixtures of graphics and then some numbers behind that. You'll find that accountants often, they like the detail, they like the numbers, of course, they need the summary and then the ability to drill down. CFO, of course, they're going to want summary of age debt and creditors as well, cash flow reports, valuation of stock in a production environment, etc. Top N of anything. Okay, and the CEO, of course, all that plus more. So stop to think, who's consuming my end report? Okay, what does that look like in terms of consumption? And who's going to see that? This is a good enough time to bring in kind of this one. What's a report and what is a dashboard, just from a Power BI perspective? So again, I wanted just to clear this up, because I go and speak to customers and they talk about dashboards as reports, and they talk about all sorts of stuff. Okay, but from a Power BI perspective, only Power BI. Dashboard, of course, gives you kind of an overview, but it's got multiple focuses. It's a bit like the dashboard on your car. Okay, it takes inputs from different components. Okay, so I've got the speedo telling me how fast I'm going. I've got a temperature gauge, okay, taking temperature from the engine. I've got an external temperature gauge, taking that external temperature. I might have some tire pressure gauges, looking at the tires. I might have a fuel gauge, looking at the fuel. So different components, okay, and it gives me a one-stop shop, if you like, of those components. Can't drill in from my car dashboard, but that's kind of what it does for me. In terms of a report, though, that's typically what we build in Power BI desktop. That, again, can give me an overview of detail. I see lots of people building dashboards in reports, okay, but it's still a report. And if we have some overview information, then, of course, as I said, people like to drill into the detail. Okay, so we drill into the numbers that are supporting my graphical information. Okay, so always worth understanding what a report and what a dashboard is, because they help us tell a story. Now, here's my old mate Steve Clayton. I used to work with Steve at Microsoft, and we were both based in Reading, and we both went out and saw customers, and effectively help unlock problems to selling solutions. That's what we do. Steve now has an interesting job, and this is official job title. I picked it up off LinkedIn earlier today. Chief Storyteller at Microsoft. Okay, so for those people who don't think telling stories is a serious job, just go and ask Steve whether it's serious or not. Because yeah, it's serious. And whatever level we tell these stories at, whether it's at a high corporate level and we're telling the Microsoft story across multiple platforms to multiple audiences, etc., or we're telling our own story about Power BI using some report that we've created, we need to be sure that that's what we're doing, because that's ultimately what we are doing. We're telling some stories. We also need to be quite clear about, where those stories are going to be heard. And from a Power BI perspective, they're probably going to be on a desktop, maybe in a browser, but they could be on a tablet, smaller form factor. They could be on a phone, even smaller form factor. And you need to potentially think about the way you craft that story depending upon how people are going to see it, or have different ways of talking about the same story. Yeah, so I have a, well, we all have mobile phones, of course. There's no point in having a little checkbox in a mobile phone because my fingers are fat, right? And so the way I'm going to interact with that story is going to be different for the different devices I think about. Most people just design for the desktop and bugger everything else. It's not quite good enough. All right, so I've covered quite a lot really about storytelling and various other things, and thinking about who we're going to design our report for. Let's just get into a bit more of a nitty gritty about, give us some rules and some guidance, Ben, on creating great dashboards and reports in Power BI. Okay, and primarily, this is about reports, not dashboards. So the first thing you need to do is draw a sketch. All right. There's a reason people, created graph paper years ago, so that we can begin to lay out what we're doing. Okay. For those of you who are too young, you're millennials, graph paper, lots of rows and columns on a piece of paper. Okay. So go ahead and draw a sketch of what you think you might want your report to look like. I always get people to do this. Okay. And you can begin to think about it a bit like a newspaper article. There's a lot of similarity between potentially presenting great reports and creating great newspaper articles. Got to think about, what you want to explain. What happened? When did it happen? Where did it happen? How did it happen? Why did it happen? Yeah. What are the consequences? Again, Marnix in his demo, he had the visuals lined up. Okay, it wasn't a coincidence that one was on top of the other, because straight away you're asking one question and trying to relate that to another question. Yeah, so for example, we could just have something at the top which is kind of a main KPI or a top number. This is our sales. What are our sales? Okay, how did they happen over time? What's our age debtors, etc. Okay, where did they happen? We could go stick a big map on there, etc. That would be easy enough to do. How? What's happened this time? Year to date, month to date, quarter to date, competitive analysis. Okay, I've been working recently with schools. A multi-academy trust. They take data out of a product called SIMS, School Information Management System. There's a few of those products around, but they export that into Excel. Of course, actually, we don't export it into CSV, and it gives us lots of data, such as the ethnicity of the pupil, the age of the pupil, the sex of the pupil, obviously male, female, whether that pupil's on a pupil premium. Do they get, therefore are they from a disadvantaged background, etc., etc. And we want to compare the absence and the attainment of that pupil versus national statistics, both for, let's just say, the northwest of England versus the southwest versus the stats that the government create. So it's great having the data, but how am I doing against the competition from a school's perspective? And then if we can, the why is much more difficult. Okay, and obviously there's some AI stuff in Power BI which tries to explain why something's bigger or smaller perhaps than it was this time last month or year, etc. Okay, but let's think about organizing and flowing our data structure. Okay, so that's number one. Number one was organize it, draw a sketch, think about how that data may well flow, think about how somebody's going to read it. Secondly, always use a grid. It's dead easy. There's my graph paper, and in Power BI we can put a grid on the chart, of course, can't we? Okay, and you can in PowerPoint as well. Okay, PowerPoint, Power BI, similar tools in terms of, you know, the way you can craft a story. So always use a grid. Always use correct alignment as well. Okay, so don't have things all over the place. It's difficult visually for people to to typically see that or to follow that through. It takes a lot of effort. Create some appropriate spacing. Okay, and again, I've just put the Power BI piece from the screen earlier today. Let's just put a laser pointer on there. Yeah, there you've got grid lines and snap to grid. Okay, now I do find snap to grid a bit strange at times, depending upon if I'm changing resolution, etc., or closing the filters or the visual pane, etc. So I think there's still a little bit of work to do there, but you know, for sure, you know, appropriate spacing. Let's call it social distancing. Very important for our graphics. The other one which isn't checked, of course, here is lock objects. I see loads of people open up Power BI reports and get really frustrated on the desktop because they're moving visuals around. Just lock your objects. Okay, whilst we're here, we talk about this. We've got a selection pane. We can hide things, move things to the front, the back, etc. Oh, look, we've got a mobile layout. Now, again, not massively sexy or useful. Well, no, it is useful, but I find that I'll often either create separate visuals which I hide on a real report, which I then, you know, potentially put on the mobile layout. Can't remember if you can do that or not. Or I'll create a separate report looking at the same data, which purely just is for the mobile. Okay, which is a bit of a pain, but you know, we work with the tools that we're given. Let's think about this one. We've seen this before, haven't we? Okay, so what's wrong with this now? We kind of know that it's not telling a story. We're not top to bottom, left to right. Yeah, we got some numbers near the top, but we're not visually flowing anything nicely. Data's not, these charts aren't aligned up. There's different spaces. There's no border around, you know, half of this stuff. I have to visually think about, where does this teacher gender analysis start and end? Does it bleed over to here? So, you know, not a lot of, you might not think that there's a lot of cognitive effort coming in there, but all of these things together make this a completely forgettable report. Okay, and we don't want forgettable reports after all. So what else can we bring into this? Well, let's think about the 2/3 rule. Okay, so anybody who sits and does a bit of painting, or if you do a little bit of, let's just see if we turn that off, or if you do a little bit of photography, will know about the rule of thirds. And the rule of thirds states that if you divide any composition into thirds, vertically and horizontally, and then place the key elements of your image either along these lines or at junctions of them, you'll achieve a more pleasing arrangement and more interesting and dynamic compositions. Okay, so here's a case in point. This slide, the presentation of this particular slide was suggested to me by that nice little kind of design slide idea thing in PowerPoint. I didn't create the slide. And when you look at those design ideas in PowerPoint, they kind of adhere to the best rules. Okay, so this is one. We've got obviously the top bit here, split. Here's the top third. So that's split by a third. Now the bit in the middle, actually, I made a bit bigger. I suspected it also split it by thirds, but I wanted to do something else, okay, which we haven't talked about and I'm not going to talk about, but I put the italics in here and I also made the text a little bit bigger. Okay, so I've done a couple of things straight away. I'm drawing your eyes to the important things, the message that I want you to take away. It's the rule of thirds. It's key elements. We've got lines and junctions. That's what I care about. Okay, so the rule of thirds is really important. Okay, this doesn't apply the rule of thirds. Okay, this applies the rule of anarchy. Okay, so let's go and have a look at the rule of thirds on this particularly pleasant picture. I have no idea where it was or what it is, but I just picked it up. Hopefully somebody will be able to tell me. Let's go and draw our thirds on there. Okay, so there's our line, our rule of thirds vertically and horizontally. So therefore splitting that into 9 squares. Now, what's interesting on this what's interesting on this painting, of course, is, and as humans we're all interested in this, is it's people's faces generally. Okay, so let's have a look at where those faces are. Okay, typically they're on around or on that top line, and then they're on that final third. Okay, so that's the rule of thirds for us. You know, go and have a look at some great photos. Go and have a look at some great pictures that you like. And generally, the rule of thirds works. Not always. Of course, it's always the anti-rule, isn't there? You know, Pablo Picasso's Cubism or something like that possibly doesn't apply to the rule of thirds. Maybe it does. But, you know, a lot of our classic Renaissance stuff does. Select the right background. Okay. And again, this comes down to clutter. Okay, so have the right background. Here's a background which we just created earlier. This is a Power BI file of mine. Kind of rule of thirds a little bit. But I could put a wallpaper on there. Now that wallpaper just kind of distracts, and I've seen this all the time where people put their company logo on or whatever, and you're just like, oh, now my brain has to work out, you know, am I looking at this bit here or am I looking at this bit here? Okay, too much clutter, okay, between the two. Try and keep it relatively simple. Keep it clean. This, of course, is my favorite one. Use the right visualizations. Now, who's going to tell me what the right visualizations are? You need to work that one out. And importantly, not too many. Okay, that's key. Each visualization should tell a story and it should be useful. Okay, it should be there and it should be decluttered. Okay, so use the right visualizations, but not too many visualizations. Here we go. So I picked this one up. Somebody's risk register. I don't know if this is Power BI, Tableau or something else. What I do know is it's a mess. Too many visualizations. If somebody gave this to me, I'd say, where's my half-day training on it? Because that's what we've got. Okay, I don't know where to start. It's probably great. Okay, probably great. Well, probably, yeah, the product's probably great, but the user experience is probably really bad. Think tomato ketchup. Okay, the data's probably brilliant. The presentation lets it down. Okay, and remember, presentation is 90% of the job. Here's another one that I picked up. This is a real one from one of my customers. Projects portfolio summary status. It says at the bottom there. It's a pie chart. Oh, come on to pie charts, maybe. This just takes too much brain power to be useful. Firstly, it's in 3D. Okay, the thing about 3D is I don't know if this piece of a pie is bigger or smaller than this piece of a pie. If the numbers weren't on there, I would have no idea. So I'm displaying a visual, but I can only really interpret the visual if I compare these two numbers. Okay, now that's a bad thing to have to do. It's also, you know, it may have too much text on there. I actually think in this case, you could argue either way. Okay, I've certainly got text that adds no value. The text that adds no value to me is the 1 dot, 2 dot, 3 dot, 4 dot. And we know why that is. It's because that's how we order it. That provides us an order. And I suspect this was produced in Excel. So it's kind of random. Okay, it starts here. It starts at, you know, 35 minutes past the hour. That's the starting point, and it goes round here. That's just nuts. It's a random order. And again, I have to think about it. Who knows, next time I refresh this Excel report, that might be a different order. Okay, pre-project, as in number 1, might start up here for some reason. Just nasty. Too many colors, and we'll come on to colors a bit, but you know, you want to think about having a maximum of 4 colors. Our brains don't really work very well on short-term memory with more than 4 colors. Okay, I'm going to give you kind of my idea of a simple visual, not one of mine. This is from Guardian online website, and this is COVID, and it's COVID from a while back. So let's just think about that. It's 2D. Okay, so I don't have, you know, it's easy to see. There's a great title, New Confirmed Cases by Day. We have some labeled axes. Okay, so here we've got, you know, 150, 150, etc. And here we've got March. Okay, we actually have some graph lines. You may not be able to see them too well, but there's a line here between March that goes up vertically, and I've got some horizontal lines here as well. It's sorted appropriately, as in it's time phase data, so we would expect, you know, April something over here to March something over here, and we can see that, you know, this is going to be March the 16th because that's when the data was taken. And we've got some text that highlights, although there is a glitch here. Okay, and shame on the Guardian for this textual field here, getting those visual texts, getting those people who like to read things, should say 152 because that's the number of cases. So again, you got to be careful and not everybody gets it right. And it does say 152. It's just that it's overwritten by the bar to the left of it. I don't have to label every data point on a bar. I perhaps only want to label the interesting ones. Here's another simple visual. Leveling up. Okay, the amount of investment spent per head of population in various parts of the country. Same sort of thing, it's 2D, it's title, it has labeled axis, although this time the labels are these white lines that come down through the chart. Okay, so a different way of doing it, but it's simple. Those are the graph lines. It's sorted appropriately, largest to smallest, excuse me, in this case. Okay, we all know that there's a lot of investment going on in London, and obviously not a lot in the East Midlands. And, you know, we can choose, for those of you not in the UK, apologies, but we do get people all over from the UK in here, so you can, you know, choose your own bit. Okay, how much is transport and how much is other? And plainly, this was taken before COVID hit. Okay, so that may well change in a year's time. We have some legends on there as well. Okay, so there's a couple of places to kind of look at interesting data stories. How are we doing on time? Okay, you can go and have a look. There is the community data stories piece. There's this one. Let's just nip over to this one slightly. This was one I produced, so we'll do it in here. I just wanted to talk about you know, the easy discussion of should something be, you know, why don't we use pie charts, Ben, and why use something else? We've all seen this one. So here's my world population, taken from Wikipedia, and this is the data displayed as a tree map. So we can see China, you know, is ranked 1 out of the whole world, and it has a population of 1.4 billion. Actually, if we just look down here, India's second, etc. If we turn that into something else, a pie chart, for example, which would be the other potential visualization for that. Go away. I think I might just have deleted that. Control Z. Let's get that back. Okay, let's click here. Now press delete. Great. Let's click on this visual. Great, and now click on our pie. Okay, the data just becomes much more difficult to read. Okay, pie charts are great when we've got 1 or 2 or maybe 3 pieces of our pie, but you know, choose the right visual, understand it, have a look at it, question, is there a better visual for this? Yeah, so what are our options for visuals? We've got text that we can put on. Obviously, it's just as narrative, and often we have to write that. That's a tough one to do. We've got lots of indicators we can put on. So, you know, key performance indicators. Are we nearly there yet? How are we doing against the target? What is the target? Tons of charts which most people just kind of use. Okay, so whether it's some sort of bar chart, line chart, graph, we would typically call these, and a whole host of other charts that are available, you know, in the App Store to go and download. And then this sort of thing, which is more kind of infographic. So again, it's a number of charts, but we're using different things to display the data. Okay, so infographics is a new term. You'll see some of that, and there are kind of more infographics coming along. So just you know, choose the right one well for the right sort of user. And this again goes back to who are our users and what sort of data might they be interested in seeing and how might they want to see it. Okay, so we talked about using the right visualizations. That's good. And there's some examples there that you know we could play with. Simpler is better. You know, I like this one. How do we cleanse this up? Keep your eye in this bit at the bottom, because this isn't necessarily the best PowerPoint, but it is a good example. On this chart, which is how it comes out of a box, we've got an axis title, we've got some lines across the top, and we've got a legend. Do any of those things add any value? Well, let's go and find out. The first thing I'm going to do is remove the axis title. Okay, we'll go back and put it back in there. Okay, so that's what it looked like. Look at this bit here. Rid of the axis title. Okay, so it's cleaner. Do we need the axis title? Hopefully not. It should be in the title of the graphic itself. What else could we do? Get rid of the lines. Let's go back. Do the lines add anything? Maybe, maybe not. Okay, you could argue that it's clearer, simpler without the lines. What about the series? In this case, we've only got one series, so not much value. And again, the title should describe what we're doing. So can we get rid of the series? Sure, we can. Okay, so now we've gone from something that was out of the box, which was okay. It was the data was true, but was it good enough to tell the story? Use negative space wisely. So I kind of like this. What's negative space? Well, negative space is space around things. So, you know, we've already got a border around this table here. So can we get rid of that border? Can we make the table perhaps a little bigger to fill the border? Of course we can. Yeah, and you should do that. I once went on a PowerPoint course and the guy said, if you've got some graphics, make them as big as possible. And he's probably right. This is black and white. What about color? Color's massive. Absolutely massive. Okay, now I'm not a color specialist, I'm not an artist, but there's different types of colors and different types of ways you can begin to use colors, and they're on the screen. They're analogous, triadic, and monochromatic, and you can go and look at them all, of course. But think about this: don't have more than 3 to 5 colors displayed on a single visual. You'll struggle. The eye cannot differentiate more than 5 colors of the same hue. Okay, so the same hue is this kind of monochromatic piece down here. Okay, so that's going to have a problem for us. And think about trying to have a semantic meaning for your colors: red, amber, green. Okay, we have our typical traffic light scenario. Okay, Power BI, of course, just has some themes in there which have been brought in, and there's a theme generator. And of course, you know, you look at anything like this, they are linked up with the themes. You change the colors and they're all listed here. Office has the same sort of thing. Adobe has a color wheel. Okay, so you can go to this link here, Adobe, and you can start to play with analogous, monochromatic, etc. Okay, so you might want to try that. What I like about this, though, is there's an accessibility tools piece. Okay, some of us, or some people, okay, will suffer from color blindness. Some people, you know, 25%, I think, of the UK male population will suffer from color blindness, and this is a typical red, amber, green color blindness test. And if we were to take that color chart and look at it or display it how it might be displayed if you were colorblind, then it would look like this. That's your typical red, amber, green color blindness. Okay, so that's what it looks like if you are normal colored. or you don't have color blindness, that's what it looks like if you have the most common color blindness, but there's other ones as well. So think about it. Don't necessarily go back to what Windows used to look like many years ago. Okay, for those of us who remember Windows 3.0 or 3.1 or Windows for Workgroup or whatever, you know, it can look like that. And then finally, once we've sorted out color blindness piece, then enhance the important parts of the page. Okay, color is great for visually enhancing some things, so we can enhance the bits we want to drill into, a bit like I did with my rule of thirds. Okay, can we add some other things on there as well, such as the up and down arrows? Okay, again, think about what's important for your audience. Okay, and ultimately, hopefully, somewhere along the line, we end up with something that looks like a semi-decent report. Now I've just lost my mouse on here, so let's get rid of that, and perhaps we can get that back up there. All right, I'm going to leave you with two other slides. Here's one. This is again, footfall in parks exceeded pre-lockdown levels on 7 of the 10 days prior to the 13th of May. Again, it's everything I've talked about. Okay, it's simple. It's got some text on there. Okay, it's 2D. 2 lines, okay, labeled the trend line. Okay, we've got the lockdown, the easing of the lockdown announced. What are we doing there? We've got a title. It's a visual that I could work with. Okay, top 3 things I'm going to for you to take away. Okay, know your customer. Who are you producing this report for? Turn yourself into an artist. Don't produce tomato ketchup, produce a tomato ketchup experience. Okay, make it a good experience. And if you can, let your data tell a story. Let it explain itself. Okay, you know, those are the key things that I try and look at when I'm producing Power BI report. If somebody once comes up to me and says, hey Ben, I want it just like this Excel report, I'll always ask them, are you sure? Why? What's the point? Can we link this up to Excel? And if they're really insistent, yeah, you know, I'll do it, but not until I've asked for tough questions. All right, that's it from me. I know we've got some questions in the Q&A, maybe one. So we've got a question in the Q&A of Tim Williamson. Tells me who that picture is. It's Christ and the Adulteress. So let me publish that just in case you wanted to see that. And Nathan Lee was on about this report, which is kind of top and bottom of countries. How do we do that? That's just, if this works, this top 10 is just a bookmark which takes us through, should take us through. My laptop's a bit slow. To the top 10 fastest growing countries, so not the top 10 biggest, slightly mislabeled. Top 10 fastest growing countries and the top 10 countries. Should have been top 10 fastest. It's a bookmark, okay, and you can watch one of the Lunch and Learns to check out the bookmarks. But again, it's trying to tell that story. What are the top 10 fastest growing countries? What are the bottom 10? Okay, as in the ones which are the slowest growing. This one, I think, worked this time. I've been playing around with this a little bit. No, it didn't. Yeah, yes, it did. Okay, this is refreshed. My 10 slowest growing countries. And this is what Power BI, you know, this is the difficult bit. Why is Venezuela a slowing country? As in, why has it had a 1% shrinkage of population? Okay, 380,000 people moved out. Is it because nobody's producing babies anymore? Is it because they had a large death rate? No, it's because everybody's emigrating now out of Venezuela because the economic circumstances are so bad. And that's what we haven't, you know, that's what's kind of missing from this. It's more of the additional story, but the bit that you'd have to tell around it. Okay, so hopefully that's that. I make it 1956 and I will wrap up. Alex, over to you, my friend.
How you doing, Ben? You okay?
Yeah, not bad. You?
Yeah, really good. Thank you. Really enjoyed your talk tonight. It was it was very impressive. It was a good session. Thank you very much to yourself and to Marnix tonight. Two fantastic talks. Thanks to everyone who has darted in from the beautiful weather outside and joined us this evening. Thanks to those people who are watching it back on catch up. So if you have missed the start of the session and want to watch it back, you can click on the link after we've finished and you can watch the full session to your heart's content. Please pass on this session to anyone you think can find it worthwhile. Just going back to so first of all, I'll say thank you to Ben and Marnix for tonight's sessions. I really appreciate it. In an ideal world, they would have been in Ancoats or doing the event tonight, but such is life. Next month on the 25th of June, you'll notice on Meetup I've sent this event live tonight. We've got data flows, why you need to implement it, and 5 ways of misrepresenting data with Power BI. So we've got Benny de Jager, who I'm sure both Marnix and Ben have heard of, quite a famous Power BI speaker, and Alexander Arvidsson. So 2 fantastic talks next month. That is Thursday, the 25th of June. It will be a 6 p.m. session. It will be on MS Teams again. So any questions, do hesitate to give a shout. Please RSVP. We'll send you through the Teams link well in advance. But before then, 10th of June, on the Wednesday, we will be doing the next Season 2 Power BI session. So as Ben just showed there. Sorry.
Nice, isn't it?
Sorry, that's tonight, yes.
That's tonight. I was looking I've already accepted for next month and I'm looking to find a meeting request now.
It'll be on Meetup, it's fine. Everyone's, I think tonight's come via Meetup, but they haven't, I'll send through the link. But yeah, so Benny Diego and Alexander Arvidsson next month. Before then, on the 10th of June, we've got Season 2 of Power BI Lunch and Learn. We've got Sheb, Raymond, Ben Howard, who's seen tonight, and also Lewis Holmes, and they've got some guest speakers. So you'll have some fantastic talks over the next 6 weeks, starting 10th of June. If you want the links to the sessions for Season 1, I'll happily send them around again. But without further ado, I've got to go out and applaud the NHS for our 10th week running. So enjoy your evening, take care, stay safe, and I look forward to catching up with you at another webinar. All the best. Cheers, Marnix and Ben.
Thank you.